Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to
Dr. Mahathir Mohamad.
Dr. Mahathir Mohamad served as Malaysia's Prime Minister for 22 years from 1981 to 2003. But the 94-year-old veteran politician returned to politics a few years back to oppose the political force he was once part of, the Barisan Nasional coalition, which had ruled Malaysia since its independence from Britain in 1957. During Mohamad's first tenure as Malaysia's Prime Minister, the country experienced a period of rapid modernisation and economic growth for the country's diverse population. Millions of Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists and Christians living side by side. His life achievements were recognised at the opening session of Doha Forum 2019. During his acceptance speech, he did not hold back from expressing his views on the modern world.
Today's world is confronted with increased concern over the sustainability of global economic growth in the face of rising financial, political, social, and environmental challenges. In Southeast Asia, 10 countries decided to work as a group. The net result is stability and prosperity.
Dr. Mahathir also discussed the state of the global economy and its interconnectedness.
We don't believe in applying sanctions to force countries to accept certain ideologies and to change governments. It is not only the particular country which will suffer, but all the trading partners also will suffer economically. In a way, it is a form of dictatorship, a dictatorship that is worse than that in a country. It is international.
And before other world leaders attending the ceremony, he also talked about his country's foreign policy.
Malaysia is a friendly country. We want to be friends with everyone and enemy of none, with one obvious exception. Our population is too small to provide a good market. We need the global market. Malaysia and many others lost a big market when the US sanction is applied against Iran. Malaysia does not support the reimposition of the unilateral sanction by the US against Iran.
But is the Malaysian Prime Minister going to step down in 2020? And who would he endorse to be his successor? These are some of the questions Malaysia's Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, answers in this special edition of Talk to Al Jazeera at Doha Forum 2019.
I'm Sami Zaidan, senior presenter from Al Jazeera International. It's my absolute pleasure to be here with you today. My pleasure to be here as well with His Excellency Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, as we begin an interview. Thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera, first of all. A pleasure to be here with you. You've accepted now this Achievement Award, and I want to delve back into some of the highlights in your career. You were nicknamed Bapa Pemodanan. For those who are not familiar with Bahasa, that means the father of modernization. It's in reference, of course, to the dramatic transformation that took place in your country while you were Prime Minister. I want to know, though, how you see yourself. Do you think Malaysia could have made that achievement and that transformation without you?
Well, in order to grow a country, to develop a country, the first need is for stability. Ours is a multiracial nation, and normally multiracial nations are not stable. So the first job that I had to do was to make sure that all the different races work together for the country. Then, of course, that means, of course, that all the different races are represented in the government, and they can speak for their own race and also for the nation. And because everybody has a fair share in the governance of the country, they feel satisfied that their problems will be taken care of. And that leads to stability, where development becomes possible.
But many countries have tried that approach. Malaysia has been more successful than some. Just to give an example, Malaysia's GDP upon independence was comparable to Ghana, for example, but today it's around 6 times higher. Surely there have been other secrets to this success.
Well, the secret is that when you are placed as a leader in the country, you must have some ideas. You must have some ideas gleaned probably from watching what happens in other countries. In the case of Malaysia, we decided that instead of looking west, we should look east, because in the east we find countries like Japan, Korea, and the like, and they seem to have been able to overcome their difficulties and develop their country. So look east becomes a Malaysian policy, and that has contributed much towards our development.
One of the things you're renowned for is a crucial decision you made during the 1997 Asian crisis not to follow the IMF prescriptions. And it turned out well for Malaysia in the end. Malaysia transitioned that crisis quicker than some of the other countries that did follow the international advice. I want to know what made you decide to take a bold decision and break ranks with others.
Well, for a year I watched the country's currency being devalued, and that makes us very poor. We thought of all kinds of solutions, but not being a financier, not being an economist was a great, does not prevent me from, accepting radical ideas or ideas that are not common.
Did you ever have any doubts? It must have been a difficult decision to make.
Well, it was a frightening decision to make, to go against the whole world. But I thought that it would work, and well, we had to take the risk. And we plunged into this thing, and fortunately for us, that stopped the currency from depreciating because we fixed the exchange rate, and from then onwards, Malaysia recovered.
Do you think the IMF still continues to give sometimes the wrong advice to countries?
Well, the IMF eventually agreed that what I did was right, and I hope that the IMF will not be so conventional as to always recommend the normal thing, the expected thing.
How has your time in politics changed you, not just as a politician, but as a human being?
Well, I decided to resign after I'd been in government for 22 years, thinking that younger people should take over. And I wanted to retire, really, but after some time, lots of people came and asked me, please do something about what's happening in the country. Eventually, I had to do something, and that involves coming back.
A head of state once told me that no matter how principled you start out in politics, at some point you are going to have to, as he put it, dance with the devil. Do you agree with that? Have you ever had to make decisions which haven't sat 100% comfortably with your conscience?
Well, when you are ignorant about the normal things, then you can do abnormal things. So at times, of course, I get frightened with my own decisions, but you have to try out something in order to solve an issue that seems not being solved through conventional means.
So you've never had to make a decision that you... I mean, do you have any regrets? Do you feel like there's something you would have done differently?
Well, there are things that I feel, of course, during my time. I made decisions which I thought would solve the problem, but in the end I found that it was not effective.
What achievement are you most proud of, and what would you consider to be that biggest mistake?
Well, in our country there are 3 major races, but they are not developing equally. in their search for wealth, for example. And I thought that this is a problem of culture, of value system. So I tried to change the value system of the ethnic group which are behind, but I failed in that effort.
Looking forward to the KL summit, the Kuala Lumpur summit, you're the chairman of it. What must the KL summit achieve in December 2019 in order for it to be a success?
I've been watching the development in the Muslim world. Almost all Muslim countries are not considered as developed, not a single one. And then we see a lot of troubles in many Muslim countries, which failures of governance, and also they've been fighting each other, and there have been people from Muslim countries have run away from their own countries to seek security in other countries. So these are major problems, and many of them have been expelled from their country, hounded, and killed and tortured. These are the problems which we have to understand. Why is it happening? And if we know why, maybe we can find some solution.
For solutions of the nature you're talking about, though, when it comes to uneven development, one would have to look deeper into some of the countries you're referring to, which, according to international statistics and report, indicate a level of mismanagement, lack of democracy, uneven access to resources. Can there really be a renaissance? Can you even address that properly in a summit without tackling some of these issues?
Well, in the first place, we need to understand the problem. We need to see the background to the problem.
Do you think the leaders of the Muslim world understand that problem? Do you think the leaders of some of those countries who are attending the KL summit truly understand the problem?
I think I've talked with them personally in small, when I met them, and they seem to have the same concern as many other Muslim leaders have. And I think it is about time we sit down seriously to look at this problem and to find solutions.
Do you think the launch of the KL summit in itself is an indication of the failure of other initiatives like the OIC?
Well, the OIC is a big grouping of 52 over countries. When we have too many people, finding some consensus becomes very difficult. But with only 5 countries, it's much easier to reach.
You think you'll be more effective? Yeah. You've also commented on some of the global trends going on in the world today. I wonder if I can get you to talk a little bit more about them, specifically about the issue of trade wars, which you mentioned. Do you think the US and China have been too rigid in how they've approached trade issues?
Well, trade wars do not solve anything. They only antagonize people, and other people not related to the war suffer. So I think all conflicts between nations should be settled through negotiation, arbitration, or a court of law. That is how Malaysia solved its problem over overlapping claim between its neighbors.
But are they failing in that regard, the US and China? Are they being too rigid in their stances they're taking right now?
But there is too much politics involved, not economic sense. If you follow economic rules, I'm not an economist, perhaps you can solve the problem in a much better way than confrontation and trying to destroy each other.
All right, and you also mentioned multilateralism and the rise of the right. Are you comfortable with the direction that the current US administration, the Trump administration, is leading the world in with regard to multilateral action?
Well, I cannot say but what the US doing now is the right thing. Becoming very nationalist is good, but not at the expense of other people. We believe that every country should care about itself, but that being needing to be protected or secure does not mean confronting others. It's better if we learn to work together in a multilateral world, because whatever a big country does, it affects other countries, especially the poor countries. So that is not a solution. We were going a long way towards multilateralism, but now nationalism seems to affect many countries, and they are more right today than they were left, or even mid-center as before.
You also mentioned sanctions on Iran. Will you be rallying, trying to take action to mitigate and counter the unilateral US sanctions on Iran?
Well, ours is a very small economy by comparison to the US. We have a trade surplus with the US. Obviously, we don't like the idea of sanctions. So what we can do is just to preach the values of peaceful resolution to conflicts, rather than confrontation, sanctions, and the like.
You also mentioned the issue of retirement. And for any leader, no matter how great a run they've had in office, one of the issues that comes up is when they will leave the political stage and what will happen next. One of the questions that's burning right now in the Malaysian media, or is being talked and discussed about a lot, is whether 2020 will be the last year for Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad as Prime Minister of Malaysia. Will it be, sir?
Which part of it?
Will 2020 be the year in which you decide to exit the office of Prime Minister?
Yeah. Well, we had a vision to become a fully developed country by the year 2020. Unfortunately, after I stepped down, the leadership took a different course, different policies, and that caused the target not to be achieved in 2020. So what we have settled for is that we will still try, but we have moved the accomplishment date from 2020 to between 2025 and 2030. There is a new approach to solving our economic problem, and this time around, we want everybody to benefit and not any particular group only.
So if I understand correctly, you feel there's a need, the country needs your leadership well beyond 2020.
Well, I have promised that I would step down once I have resolved some of the major problems that has been left by the previous government. I promise that I will step down and give the leadership to a candidate that has been named by the coalition.
Talking about issues that need to be resolved, can you say 2020 will be the year that the Sedition law, the Security Offences Act, will be repealed? Some of the tools that were used by the previous administration to suppress civil liberties. Of course, the ruling coalition, your ruling coalition, it campaigned on a platform to scrap some of these, but there's been criticism that you haven't moved quick enough. Will 2020 be the year in which some of these tools will be repressed? Repealed, rather?
The problems were very big, very serious. You cannot achieve success in our efforts to overcome the problems overnight. It takes time. We are given actually 5 years to accomplish this objective. But in the first year, 1.5 years now, we have solved many of the problems. For example, the huge borrowing by the previous government should make us bankrupt. But we managed to overcome that because we managed the finances of the country much better than before. We are also still very stable as a nation, despite the fact that there is a sudden change of government. which has never changed for the past 60 years. Normally, when there is a change of government, it causes disruption. There would be demonstration in the street, there would be strike, there might even be violence. But in Malaysia, the switch from the previous government to the new government went off very smoothly, which is something we didn't expect because we had never experienced changes of government. So to that extent, we have done fairly well, I would claim. But there are other areas. For example, we found that corruption was the one that brought down the previous government. We have taken steps to the extent that today no one complains about corruption. They may complain about delays in making decisions and all that, but delays, of course, happens when a new government takes over. And
right. You have made, I think even your critics will agree that you've made a lot of progress, but still specifically there are some issues. Can you give a timeline for scrapping some of those laws I mentioned and for passing the bill called the Independent Police Complaints and Misconduct Commission, which the opposition is pushing for? Can you say 2020 is when you'll get civil liberties in order?
There are some laws which need to be revised or amended, but some of these laws have got their are practically guaranteed by the constitution of the country. If we have to change the laws, we need to get the constitution of the country also allowing us to do it, or at least making changes that will enable us to change the laws. But to change the constitution requires a two-thirds majority. Our government has not got the two-thirds majority. We need to depend upon the opposition. But the opposition, of course, is not very forthcoming.
Do you think the leader of the ruling coalition, Anwar Ibrahim, is the best person to take over at some point? Would you endorse him?
Well, I cannot guarantee who would be the best person to take over because I've had bad experience. I have named my successors, and when they took over, they do different things.
Do you have any regrets about, I mean, you've had a, let's say, an off-and-on relationship with Anwar Ibrahim. Any regrets about how that has transpired in the past?
Before, of course, we were antagonistic towards each other, but we realized that the country's needs is more important than our personal feelings. So we decided to forget the past and concentrate on developing the country. That is more important than our quarrels.
Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.